Emma, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a
So,
pleasure to be here.
yeah, it's great to be with you. And I'm so excited to introduce you to, I think, a lot of people who haven't heard of shadow yoga before. And so that's the method that you teach. So I'd love just to hear in your words, sort of what is shadow yoga? How is it maybe different than what a lot of people have access to for yoga classes?
Okay. There's a lot I can explain on this, but in a nutshell, let me put it like that. The term shadow yoga is chaya yoga. So it was actually something developed by my husband, Shandor. There's actually a book that he wrote on shadow yoga. And it was in the early 2000s that we started the teaching of the shadow yoga. The term really it's a synonym for hatha yoga, shadow yoga. So the origin of the name comes from the Shiva Swarodaya, which is an ancient Tantrika text. And they talk in the sixth chapter there. It's called the Yoga of the Shadow Man, which is basically referring to the birth of the breath of life. And the text is written in that sense that they talk about it's through the different layers or shadows that we touch the true self. So it's working through those layers that one goes back to the individual soul. And if you look at the body has a gender, but the soul has no gender. And so with the sister sciences, also with Ayurveda and yoga, when we look at it, Ayurveda is all about the outflow of the life and that element and the process of the seasons supporting us, whereas the Hatha Yoga is about the inward flow or the inward journey back to the true self. But we need the vehicle to be healthy, really to harness the aspect of the mind, because the mind pervades this body, is to direct the prana. So the prana will go wherever the mind goes. And when I talk about the mind, I refer to the intuitive mind, not the intellect. But if the intellect is always dominating, it's technique that is pushed upon the body, which we need in the beginning to understand the technique. But too much technique, it kills the intuitive aspect.
Right. I think that is such a good point, Emma, that the mind takes over a lot of the practice. People are learning a lot of body work
Yes,
outside of the context that the body, we're trying to break up obstructions, as you say, sort of get energy moving through the legs again, but
yes,
all in the service of moving towards being able to direct the mind inwards.
exactly. Yes. And it's also that if you look at how the tools are in Hatha Yoga and also in the teaching with the Shadow Yoga school, if you look at just the basic things like the charanas or the warm-ups, as we can call them, it's just joint movements. So just doing those joint movements, turning your head, your shoulders, you don't have to think because the mind gets involved with the movement. So the breathing becomes natural and then the prana starts to circulate. So all of this is to loosen those parts. And then once we get to more of the standing work and the asana work, you start to gather this energy that you've loosened. And then once you've gathered everything, you assemble it. And once you've assembled it, you can absorb it. So if we look at, say, Kate, because obviously you fantastic cook and you have amazing cookbooks, it's like cooking, no? You have to, you know, you might go to the market, buy the vegetables and you shake them out a bit, loosen whatever you need to, put them all out, gather them together, see what you're going to use from whatever tools you have in the kitchen. And then you have to assemble all those things into a pot or a pan or however you're going to cook them. And then the body has to absorb and digest that. So
Right.
it's kind of a simple analogy to understand. That's what we're doing with our body. It's the same thing. We're loosening the parts, gathering the energy, assembling the energy. I guess assembling, if we look at it in the Hatha Yoga, is related to the mudra work and Kriya. So it's those aspects where you're actually sealing the energy, maintaining the energy in the body or the prana, the life, and then you can absorb that. But without good fire or agni, Nothing is absorbed.
I mean, you say that Goraknath sort of brought yoga to the people.
Yeah.
Would you include women
Mm,
say in these medieval times? Women were
definitely. I
practicing
mean,
yoga.
yes. And also, and when we look at some of the texts, there's always that dialogue between, say, Shiva and Parvati, or
Mhm.
Yajnavalkya and Gargi. So there's always those two energies. And hence, Hatha Yoga is the sun and moon energies. So this is why they say that Hatha Yoga is tantric teaching, because Tantra means to weave. So we're constantly weaving the two Ida Pingala, or the sun moon channel, to bring the aspect centrally, which is the fire channel, Agni. And so it's through these aspects of the practice that it's important, when the individual starts on the path, that they start slowly. And definitely the vyayama, or the exercise aspect of the practice, is very important in the beginning, because most people, they have no clue in the beginning how to coordinate, where's my hand, where's my foot. So even the body parts we coordinate, the hands, feet relate, the elbows, the knees, the shoulders, the hips, top of the head, coccyx, the neck, the waist. So all of these aspects of the body come into play with these vyayamas, and also with the karanas. So this then, again, going back to the analogy of the loosening with the joint movements, and then gathering the energy or the prana, the life, we're gathering that once we've loosened it. So it's through these movements on the feet, because the source of power is in the feet. It's from the feet that this power is cultivated in the legs. And as we know in the Ayurvedic principle, they say all disease comes from weakness in Apanavayu, which lives in a huge section of the body, the legs, and from the tuft all the way down your spine to your heels.
Right, which I found Apana to be sort of the ace in the game with women's health for sure. Would you
Yes.
say in your teaching for women, are you more focused on Apana Vayu, or that downward moving flow below the waist?
Um, I don't think I think for men and women the same. I guess the difference is, it's because really it's the legs is what we have to cultivate as we age. So, when you're young, you can, I mean, even if we look at the Ashtanga system, the forms that they get, it builds the strength of the body. So that's needed when you're young, definitely. But once we get to that midlife, for women between like 35, 65, for men it's around 40 to 70, the practices and the approach to our life definitely has to change. And the Apana Vayu starts to weaken. When we look at people as they grow older, it's from the feet up that the legs start to go first. And definitely in modern science and medicine, they talk about, if someone falls and fractures their hip in old age, usually not long after that do they depart the body. So it tells us how important it is to strengthen Apana Vayu with our approach to life in that midlife period.
Right,
And it's
like the
also when
leg work.
Agni starts, sorry to interrupt you, Kate. Yeah, the leg. And yeah, but it's also that the Agni starts to weaken at that time. I mean, I know I don't really want to go into the different ages of life, because I know you talk about that a lot in your books as well, especially in your new book. And it's definitely information that's common in the Ayurvedic discipline, the different stages of life and how important. But when we look at that midlife, it's a major time of, fire, but then air starts to creep in, and the air will just spur the fire to inflate if we're not careful.
Right. So you talked about with your workshops you're doing for women and
Mm.
yoga. I see you talking about harnessing the female energy. What do you mean by that? Like, how would you describe that to the lay person?
So we know what harness means. It's like it's like also with a horse, you put the harness on to lead the
Yeah.
horse the water. So it's really, I guess, for women's health specifically, I mean, I feel like it's something that's, it came to me through when I started teaching in my kind of early 30s, when I was traveling with the teaching more, that some of the teachers who had schools were males, and they said to me, Emma, we don't know what to do with all these females. Like, they've got this and they've got so that's when it kind of started, that I started introducing the yoga for women. And, that it's always been there, but I guess it was something that was really necessary to understand for women, how to harness this energy. So it's basically your reproductive energy, because for men and women, that's the source of where the Kundalini Shakti, that energy lives, and that feeds that central fire channel. So the harnessing that energy is to understand what to do in the different stages of life for the female. So if we look at, women are blessed with being initiated in life differently to men. If we look even indigenously into cultures, men, usually any kind of initiation is quite physical, and they have to cause some kind of harm to the body so they feel something in a sense. Whereas women, we have that, we're more rounded by nature, even the way we operate in the world. And it's all to do with the shape of our womb. Like the womb it's a space that we hold a creative energy. So it's harnessing and understanding that energy, that it can help the woman in these different stages of life carry her into that forest dwelling aspect after the age of 65, when, we want to become more quiet. So the puberty, both sexes go through, but for women, when we go through the puberty, we're initiated with the menstrual cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one big transition for a woman. Pregnancy, another big transition for a woman, and then menopause. So you've got those three big transitional times with hormones, with what the body starts to do, with how it changes its shape, everything. So it's important for women at that time, when they start out with the yogic activity, understanding this energy and how to harness it and cultivate it so it feeds their blood. In that sense, for women, whether we're menstruating, whether pregnant, whether menopausal, we have to take care of the blood. When we menstruate, we lose the blood, obviously, but it's very, important. Even when you get to menopause, women think, I don't bleed anymore. So, but you still have to take care of the blood, because our blood, again, has to do with the fire principle, with Agni. So if we look, it's really Agni that is serving us all the time. And as soon as that light goes out, then the body goes out, the prana departs. So it's fueled, these two, the life is fueled with the Agni. So the harnessing of that energy is very important during these times. And even if one doesn't have a child, there's still a creative process for the woman, even if she doesn't give birth. But if we look at in a recent workshop I did actually on menopause, I talked about this quite in detail, that women, when they go through the menopause, it's the reversal of that outward flowing aspect during your cycle to an inward flowing. So basically, that fire reverses itself. And this is why they say it's the time of wisdom for the woman. And for women in the human form, we actually are blessed with menopause, because we continue on in life and we become, the grandmother or the teacher or some guide to those generations before us. And where our responsibility is to educate these young women, so it's a little bit easier for them on the path when they get to this transitional time. But, in nature, animals, they pretty much, once they can't procreate anymore, that's it. They depart. So it's very important for women to see, I think, menopause nowadays as a blessing, not a curse. Just like some students, they complain, oh, I've got my cycle, I can't do the yoga practice. Because, during your cycle also with the yoga, you have to respect, especially the first 3 days of the bleed, to support the blood. There's a few things you can do, which I talk about in my article, which are helpful when you're bleeding, but generally it's rest, because you're cleaning. So this is all Mother Nature initiating us. when this is going on, Kate, you can watch that downward flow of apana vayu. You don't have to think about how this energy moves. You can actually just observe it during the menstruation, because it happens for 3, 5, or 7 days, depending on the woman. And then, you know, obviously if women do decide to have children, again, the womb is there to create the child. That transition, they have to watch the blood, definitely. They're feeding 2 people. So that's important. And then, but they're cooking. It's like there's a little pot there and everything's cooking. When we get to the menopause and all of this starts to dissolve, and it's that reversal of energy, then different things will definitely come to the surface. And there's so much scientific study on this now. A lot of it was done in the past by men, but there's also now studies done by women. Like I've read a few studies, neuroscientists talking about how important the connection is, obviously, with our endocrine system and the brain, because it's all just for when you release the egg, when you're going to flow. So I'm not, you know, obviously those things, it's easy to find that information. But I think what's interesting, when people start to research in this way, you can start to understand that there is more research into the menopause, whereas it was a taboo in the past and shunned by society. But now actually people are wanting to understand more, because it's that transition for women that's really important to be supported, just like when they are pregnant or when they are menstruating, especially if they're in the workforce, in the corporate world, or it's, you know, it can be very difficult when women have hot flushes, anything going on then, and they're presenting something to a board meeting. But scientifically, what I found interesting from some of the studies, and one woman in particular, she is a neuroscientist. She actually has done studies on women's brains when they're perimenopausal, so not postmenopausal. And most of the studies on the brain have been done postmenopausal. And, you know, obviously when they start giving women hormone replacement, it's all done after the fact. So the understanding of how women should take care of themselves before they actually become postmenopausal is very important.
Right.
And all of that, you know, I know personally for myself, you know, I've traveled a lot. It was kind of like when the pandemic came, it was a great thing, because no more travel for a while, is that once you get to that age of 40, you really start to feel strongly how things, you know, even though things start changing at 35 with your hormones, hence why it's better to have children before 35, because your hormones are already shifting after that. When you get to that stage in your 40s, you really start to feel those changes come to play, that drying up. You know, seasonally, when we look at it, how the body is, it's autumn, and then winter is, you know, that later stage in life. So it's supporting all of that during this time that's important with the yoga, that a lot of women don't do, and they just keep burning. So it's, you know, obviously the fire is working, but is it a good fire or is it Agni? Because Agni is like the coal. It's not the lava of the volcano that's melting and dissolving everything, but it's that really nice coal that we want.
Right.
During time.
I think we have a lot of women listening who are in perimenopause time of life. I know I get a lot of questions about that. What if you could tell them one thing, what would it be?
I feel like it's to accept the transformation at that time.
Yeah.
It's difficult because also Western society, symptom, get a pill. Or even if it's not, people go, even like might not be go to the doctor, but go to the herbalist, get this, get that. Just, you know, so everything is about, can you actually accept the transition? Yes, use things that are supportive at this time, but don't look to fix it, because it's not going to fix. It's actually, we're going back to the studies they've done on the female brain. The interesting thing is that our brain goes through a transition in like between like 9 to 10 years, it completely changes. Whereas men, it takes about 30 years. So they don't even notice it. They don't notice that like mental shift so much as women do. So hence why women feel like they're going crazy. They don't feel like themselves. Sometimes people get thick crawling under the skin, you know, excessive heat, all of it's normal. So I would say to the perimenopausal women, Kate, it's all normal. It's all part of the transition. So don't see it as something wrong with you or that you have to fix it, but just if you can accept the transition, use those things to support you around you, whether it's with your Ayurvedic kitchen, whatever kind of natural practices that are there for you, utilize those first. And then also with the yoga, use those things to support you. You can't do what you did at 30 once you get to 50, although women now try. And in Western society, it's all projected like that for us, just like with the tampon commercial, running on the beach when you're menstruating.
Right. So you talk about sort of menstruating being an energy moving out and menopause energy then moving inward. Could
Yes.
you describe like what your experience of that shift was like?
Or during the menopause?
Yeah.
So I noticed I can describe it with the practices, especially.
Yep.
I really noticed the mind definitely starts to turn in a very different way. So I guess you could, going back to that weave, it's really that the Hatha Yoga practices during this transformational time is to direct our mind differently, curb it differently, because the intellect will freak out about the symptoms that may be coming up. And then we can start to weave a completely new thread with our body, because it is, even our bone structure changes every 12 years. So, the body is an incredible thing. And I think a lot of the time we don't pay attention to what's happening during these transitions, because the intellect is hanging on to what it was in the past. And it also has this memory, the body, oh, I used to do this particular practice and I used to feel like this, and now I'm doing it and I don't feel like that, or I can't do this pose anymore. Well, who cares?
Yeah.
It's
So
like,
true. Yeah.
yeah. And I think even when we look in the Shaolin tradition, because I also trained with the Shifu in London many years ago, I trained in the Shaolin tradition. And, the little children, they're doing all this amazing gymnastic activity when they're young. But once they get to their late 20s, 30s, all the practices for them, they don't do all that activity. That's only to make the body strong. Then the practices also change them, because even though they're working with a martial activity, the internal cultivation already starts to happen. Same. So if we look in all the internal arts, all of the tools that we apply in the beginning are there to understand. And then you have to pick the right tools during the transformations that you go through. So, whether you're menstruating, when you're pregnant, menopause, big transformations, big shifts. So you have to use the right tools at that time. So are you intuitively taking those tools, or is the intellect taking the tool because it wants something that it used to have? So this is the struggle I think most women find. And then also how you start to look, or, or my hair's turning this, or my skin's doing this. And it's all normal. It doesn't mean you're going to look like that forever. It's, I think it's also like, once you've been through, the transition, if you go through it in an intelligent way, then you come out on the other side, that new thread that you've weaved, because you've weaved it with the right tools during that transition. And it's definitely not easy, Kate, and I know for, personally for myself, there was times when especially with traveling and things, when I would not feel good, but, you have to just, I wouldn't say bite the bullet, but you have to, I mean, that's kind of a movie phrase, bite the bullet and keep going, but that's not the right attitude to have. It's to, okay, what tools do I have? What do I need now to support this? But and support, not fix. So I think it's also that acceptance of using supporting things through these transitions, not trying to fix a symptom, because it's never symptomatic. It's just going to change anyway. It's not there forever. But what's causing it? And if it keeps arising, the physical symptom keeps arising, then what is the cause? What is my And usually, I mean, especially with menopause from personal experience, it's not just this physical aspect of transformation, but such a huge mental transformation, like I said. And, we can see this in scientific evidence that's now being revealed too. So the activity is to be kind to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And make yourself your best friend during those times.
That's great. That's a great point. And I hear you saying something about change. Like I think the mind tends to go, as you say, towards the past and
Yes.
towards craving experiences that we've already had, where you're describing like a landscape that's completely new. And so the practices and the tools that you used previously might change completely. And that it should, right? That's normal and natural for things to completely change. I see a conversation right now in the perimenopause, menopause circles that we should try to fix it and we should try to maintain, the external strength and be able to do what we used to do. And there's something about the way that you describe the weaving. It's like a whole new cloth and a whole new body, right? And so there's this opportunity to actually become something. It's like the chrysalis,
Yes.
with the butterfly, to actually become something completely new. And I feel that's a difficult thing, I think, for a lot of people because the life around you may appear the same while you're undergoing these changes. That has been my challenge with the yoga. Like sometimes I have to actually slow it down because it's like my life and the yoga are rubbing again. They're creating too much friction in that
Yes.
moment. So it's like, okay, let's just slow this down. Let's just, allow things to sort of settle before I sort of start really like, I want to say kind of like grinding those tools, or using that axe and kind of, chopping the vegetables up to make the soup. And I think, there's the transformation and there's also the knowledge that the transformation takes time, and
Yes.
is messy and goes on. And I think there's also potentially a lot of experimentation that we don't know coming into it, where we're going or what we're weaving. I think maybe a lot of us want to feel like we're doing it right. Like I'm going to do perimenopause correctly, you know?
It is. Yeah. And we think, oh, I mean, I'm like post-menopause now. So I think, oh, the mind goes, oh, I could have done this but I didn't. So what? I don't have any, what I learned was so beneficial for also for what I can teach to other women too with the yoga. And one, like I said, Kate, right at the beginning, the yoga is a spiritual practice. It's a return journey to the self, to the true self, without all the vasanas or imprints from the family, from the upbringing. And if we look at this aspect of it, it's the return journey to the self that you're using all these tools. So, when you're younger, you use the tools. You might use more tools because you need to, and you're building strength. But once you start to move into the midlife, the cultivation towards the activity is that the focus should be more on that spiritual ascent, moving towards that time, because it's that will also feed you once you get older. It's not,
Right.
the yoga is not exercise. If you want to exercise, go for a walk, go for a run, go for a swim. That's all, that's complementary to obviously what you're doing. If you can, do those kind of activities. If not, the yoga will give you enough support. I mean, the Surya Namaskar is there as, let's say, a more dynamic approach. But in the end, even all the pranayamas they give, Shitali, Sitkari, Surya Bedda, Chandra Bedda, Nadi Shuddhi, all the different pranayamas, they're all for the physical benefit. The real pranayama is when there is no breathing. So this is why the importance of the use of mantra within the activity as well, because that also is something, going back to that term harness, it harnesses our mind. the focus of the mind is then on the sound, but mentally repeating, not out loud. And it's that then starts to steer the prana or the life to be directed into the right parts and steers the individual towards the meditative aspect. And if we don't utilize the tools in that way during the transitions and understand them, we don't know what to take out of our toolbox at the right time. And it's really, when we look at when there's the transitions, when there's the symptoms that surface, okay, for example, I have a lot of heat in my head, I have a headache, my ears are ringing, my eyes are a bit stingy, my body's feeling tired. Okay, what do I do? Put a blindfold on, lie supta over a bolster, then lean forward, then sit up. The best pranayama really to balance also the mind is just simple alternate nostril breathing, because it really will bring the mind into that central pathway. But if there's a lot of heat, you can use Shitali. It will cool the excess heat from the tissues. So this is just a kind of general example. And I guess what I talk about in that Yoga for Women article and in the different workshops I do for women especially, how some of the activities, when you are going through a difficult transition, you have to use these tools. And if we look at when we get sick, you said a lot of people find it hard. Yes, but if we look, when you're sick or something comes to you in that sense, you have to be with it. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's 2 weeks. So it's the same here. It's just another symptom. It's not a sickness though. It's just, it's a symptom that's coming, and you have to just be with that and then use what you can at that time to help you through it. But eventually, once you've understood all your tools, and they talk about this in the text, you really just need one asana. You need one mudra. You need one kriya. It's not to keep doing all of these multiple aspects of the sadhana forever and ever. Because once you've mastered something, you don't need to warm up or practice it. It lives in you. So okay, I need to do Padmasana today. Padmasana for women is one of the best asanas. It cures, they say in the text, all disease, but especially for the women, because Padmasana has a direct effect on the ovaries. So it's a great pose, and there's many variations you can do on your stomach, on your side, leaning forward, lying back with your legs up the wall, on your head Padmasana, even the shoulder stand. When you're in Padmasana, when you bring the knees into the palms, that particular form is for all problems with the reproductive area, prolapse, any kind of difficulties like that. But if women can't go upside down, just simple legs up the wall and have the head slightly raised, it also works on the thyroid. So it will help with the hormonal secretions, but it will calm the mind, and the body gets complete rest. That's one thing I found when I started going through when I was kind of perimenopausal, and when my cycle really started changing. I also was in the midst of making my film Agni Yogana. My father passed away all of a sudden, who I was very close to. So all of this, it all happened. And, you think to yourself sometimes in life, it kind of, everything comes down at once, usually. It doesn't come in little nice bits at a time, but it's all at once. And they're the most difficult times, but they're the times that we can become the strongest within ourselves if we don't push. And it was at that time, I used to sometimes I'd wake up, feel like I'd hit the wall, So I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to put my legs up. I'd go to sleep sometimes with my legs up the wall, and then I would be refreshed, and then I go, okay, well, what does the body need now today to support whatever the feeling was when I woke up? So I feel like these are really important things to pay attention to every morning.
Yeah. And I love the simplicity of the tools that you're sharing. So we have, a few asanas, a few pranayamas, some mantra, and I think there's probably a lot of people who are looking for that and don't know where to find it, which is part of why I'm so excited to share your work with this audience. And I know you have retreats in India. And we'll put the article, it's in the back of my book. We'll also put it in the show notes, and we'll send people towards your website. The Shadow Yoga book is also, I think, a great place for people who want to just learn more about the method kind of from the beginning. Is there anything you want us to know about that's coming up for you, or a great way to kind of get started working with you?
I think, yeah, I mean, obviously, what if people look at the website, Kate, there's different courses there,
Yep.
and most of the courses, are open to if there's specific instruction on the site if you have some shadow yoga background. One thing, I'd like to say for women, it's also like what you just explained, not doing much. I always say to people in the morning, it's like brushing your teeth. So when you get up in the morning, you should first sit before you jump out of bed. Yeah.
Mm.
And then you go clean up, and then you might drink a little bit of warm water, not too much. And then even if you just do the charanas, the simple warm-ups, you can find those on the Shadow Yoga YouTube channel. They can be done standing or seated. Just that, maybe a couple of squats, put your legs up, go to your day. Because I think what people find now, it's different. They think, I have to do 2 hours of yoga. Well, for me, it's very different. This is my path, my journey, and what I live every day of my life. But some people, they've got family, they've got to go to work. So just like they can put 20 minutes there, just a little bit, like that's enough to start to cultivate the mind and the body in the right direction. And then slowly time will allow things to come in more, especially as life's transitions start to change as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And 20 minutes is enough. I can also attest to that it works. It works, 20 minutes. So you kind of already answered one of my last questions for you. Are you open to a couple rapid fire questions? So it's just kind of a one sentence answer. So what is the first thing you do in the morning?
I sit.
I knew you were going to say that. Yep.
It's actually just what I said. Yeah, sit,
yep, exactly.
clean up, drink a bit of hot water.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So you already answered that. What's the first food you put in your body?
Changes with the seasons.
Good answer. Yep.
Always I focus on what's in season. That's the first food, depending. And obviously, if it's winter, it's warmer, cooked. If it's summer, it's also different because, with the seasons, that's my answer. That's my quick answer.
That's perfect. And what do you do to wind down in the evening?
I always do a sitting before sleep. So, and again, that will change depending on my energy that particular day. But I find to sit, and even if one doesn't have a mantra they're using or a meditation practice, just to sit and keep the focus on the Muladhara chakra, the base chakra. It grounds the mind, and just focus on the quietness. Don't think about, I think, a lot of people say focus on your breathing, but don't do that either, because then the mind will start thinking about breathing.
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, before to wind down in the evening, I sit before sleep, and it will depend, obviously, different things are done depending on how I feel after the day.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us today.
Thank you for having me, Kate, and it was a pleasure to share. I feel like I have so much more I wanted to share, but time is
always. Hey, we can do it again. We can do it again.
Yes.
We'll see what questions people have, and we can answer to that. That would be great.
If it helps, then I'm happy.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.